Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hi Nanda, how are you? Let's start this lesson today by saying Basmalah all together. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Nanda, in this project we will learn about life cycle of plants atau siklus tanaman. In this chapter, we will learn about parts of flowers, pollination, fertilization, dispersals of seed, and scheme of life cycle of flowering plants. Okay, let's start for the first one. Today, we will learn about part of flowers. Look at this video.
Parts of a flower. Flowers vary in size, shape, and color, but all flowers have the same basic parts. The main parts of flowers are pedicel and thalamus, calyx or sepals, corolla or petals, androecium or stamens, gynecium or pistils. Pedicel and thalamus. The flower is borne on a stalk called pedicel. The uppermost end of the pedicel is swollen. This swollen part of the pedicel is known as the thalamus or receptacle. It bears all the four whorls of a flower. Calyx or sepals. The outermost whorl of a flower is calyx. It consists of leaf-like structures called sepals. Sepals are usually green in color. Calyx also protects the flower during the bud stage. Corolla or petals. Corolla is the second whorl of a flower. Each segment of the corolla is known as petal. Petals are usually brightly colored due to the presence of pigments. The bright color, sweet smell, and nectar attract the insects. Androecium or stamens. It is the third floral whorl which is composed of one or more male reproductive organs called stamens. Each stamen consists of a thin stalk called filament and two lobed head called anther. The anther and filament are connected by a connective tissue. Each anther lobe has two pollen sacs which are filled with pollen grains. Pollen grains are minute in size and take part in reproduction. Gynecium or pistils. Gynecium is the fourth whorl of a flower which is composed of one or more female reproductive organs called carpel. Each carpel consists of an ovary, style, and stigma. The stigma is the terminal part of the pistil. It is sticky, rough, and hairy. Stigma is meant for receiving pollen grains during pollination. The style is the thread-like structure which connects the stigma with the ovary. It is meant for raising the level of the stigma. The basal, swollen part of the pistil is called ovary. The ovary bears ovules on a swollen tissue called placenta. Each ovary contains a female reproductive cell or egg.
From those videos, we know that there are so many kinds of flowering plants. If you forgot the part of plant, You can open your book, page 23. Okay, Nanda, let's discuss about how flower can reproduce. Okay, the first one, you have to understand what is the meaning of pollination. Pollination dalam bahasa Indonesia adalah penyerbukan. Penyerbukan itu apa? Ada yang tahu, Nanda? Penyerbukan adalah jatuhnya serbuk sari atau pollen ke atas kepala putik atau stigma. In English, when the pollen grain get transferred to the stigma is called pollination. The material of pollination can you see at your science book, page 32. To make it more easily, you can watch this video.
Sexual reproduction in plants. In this module, you will learn how sexual reproduction takes place in flowering plants. It is spring season. Flowers are blooming on the trees. It is indeed a beautiful sight. Flowers attract all of us. They are the most beautiful part of the plant, isn't it? You already know that flowers are not present only to add beauty to the plant. They are in fact the reproductive part of the plant. In the flower, stamen is the male reproductive part, while carpel is the female reproductive part. Some flowers contain both male and female reproductive parts. Such flowers are called bisexual flowers. For example, pea, China rose, etc. On the other hand, some flowers possess either the male or the female reproductive parts. Such flowers are called unisexual flowers. For example, corn, cucumber, etc. Now let us know about the different parts that make up a stamen and a carpel. A stamen is made of two main parts, anther and filament. The anther produces pollen grains. It is the pollen grain that contains the male gametes. A carpel, on the other hand, is made up of three parts. The terminal part is called the stigma. The middle elongated part is the style, and the swollen bottom part is the ovary. Inside the ovary, ovules are present. It is the ovule that has the female gamete called the egg cell. For sexual reproduction to take place, a male gamete is to be fused with the female gamete, thereby forming a zygote. Now for that, the male gametes have to reach the female gametes. For this, first a pollen grain carrying the male gametes is transferred from the stamen of a flower to the stigma of the same or the other flower. Such transfer of pollen grains is known as pollination. If the pollen grain of a flower lands on the stigma of the same flower, it is called self-pollination. But if the pollen grain of a flower lands on the stigma of another flower of the same or another plant of the same type, it is called cross-pollination. Pollination occurs with the help of different agents like wind, water, or animals. Once a pollen grain reaches the stigma of a suitable flower, a tube grows from the pollen grain. This tube travels through the style and reaches the ovary. The male gamete from the pollen travels in this tube and reaches to the female gamete present in the ovule of the ovary. After that, the male and the female gamete fuse together to form the zygote. This process of fusion of male and female gametes is called fertilization. The zygote formed after the fertilization then divides several times to form an embryo inside the ovule. The ovule develops a tough coat and changes to a seed. The ovary, on the other hand, ripens and forms a fruit around the seed. At this time, the other parts of the flower, like the sepals and petals, fall off. So, a seed present inside a fruit contains an embryo, which is actually a baby plant. Each time a seed is planted in soil and provided appropriate conditions, it grows into a seedling.
Oke Nanda-nanda, dari video tadi Nanda-nanda sudah bisa menarik kesimpulan bahwa ternyata tumbuhan itu bisa berkembang biak. Tentu saja didahului dengan satu proses yang disebut pollination atau penyerbukan. Why is pollination is important for the flowers? Can you answer these questions? Good. Pollination is important because it leads to the production of fruits we can eat and seeds that we will grow into a new plant. Dengan adanya penyerbukan, maka nanti akan menghasilkan buah yang bisa kita makan, dan di dalam buah ada biji yang bisa kita tanam menghasilkan tanaman baru, sehingga tanaman tidak akan habis. Oke. Pollination is not only done by flower, but some animals or some condition is help the pollination. Apa saja sih yang membantu penyerbukan ini? We will learn about types of pollination. The first one is self-pollination atau penyerbukan yang memang dilakukan di tanaman itu sendiri. Artinya alat kelamin jantan dan alat kelamin betina berada dalam satu bunga yang sama. Anda masih ingat ya, alat kelamin jantan kita sebut dengan nama stamen dan alat kelamin betina kita sebut dengan nama carpel atau pistil. Berada dalam satu bunga yang sama, disebutnya self-pollination. Yang kedua, ada yang disebut cross-pollination atau penyerbukan silang. Terjadi jika penyerbukan ini melibatkan dua bunga. Bisa yang sama spesiesnya, bisa yang berbeda. Ya. Artinya, dalam satu bunga menghasilkan serbuk sari yang bisa membuahi putik di bunga yang lain. Itu ya Nanda ya, itu yang disebut cross pollination. Yang ketiga, pollination by animals, penyerbukan yang dibantu oleh hewan. Ini sudah pasti kalian ketahui karena kalian sudah pernah belajar tentang simbiosis ya, tentang simbiosis di kelas sebelumnya. Tentunya hewan-hewannya bisa berupa serangga, ya, bisa berupa burung atau hewan lainnya, ya. Cirinya yang dibantu oleh animals itu biasanya memiliki sesuatu yang dimakan oleh animalsnya. Anda tahu apa itu? Ya, itu adalah nektar atau madu. Kemudian ada juga penyerbukan yang dibantu oleh angin dan air. Tentunya mereka memiliki karakteristik tersendiri seperti yang tadi sudah dijelaskan di video yang sebelumnya Bunda tayangkan. Oke Nanda-nanda, cukup untuk video pembelajaran kali ini. Selanjutnya kita akan bahas materi ini di sekolah ya. Tetap semangat. Thank you. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.